Welcome back to my channel. Today I will be talking about Arthur C. Clarke's The Songs of Distant Earth. This is the second Clarke novel that I have reviewed for the channel. The first was Childhood's End. So I read this and reviewed it. Kind of a mixed reaction on this book. And I don't know, I kind of have mixed feelings on this book as well. I guess this is going to be a thing with me and Clarke. A lot of interesting ideas in this book. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting ideas. I didn't hate the book, okay? Let me just talk about it for a minute because I thought that the premise of this book was really interesting. So, Earth is gone. Earth no longer exists. In fact, there's a timeline in the back of this novel, okay? A chronology in Earth years. Kind of helps you out to you can flip back here when you get confused about anything. So basic setup is that back in, I'm going to just go off the guideline here to kind of refresh my memory. Back in 1956, scientists on Earth detected neutrinos, and then they discovered anomalies in those neutrinos in 1967. By the year 2000, somewhere between 2000 and the turn of the century, like the 100s, the 22nd century, they discover that the sun is going to go nova, and they know the date that it's going to happen, which is basically like 1500 years in the future approximately. And they begin to make plans on how to get humanity to survive. They build all these ships. They call them cedar ships, and they are piloted by robots. They're basically automated, and the ships are full of frozen embryos, or I think they're embryos. Then they have like DNA ships. I don't know. It's kind of confusing. I'd have to reread it. Honestly, it's an interesting idea. It's not really explored a whole lot about how these robots interact with the humans and go out to these planets and seed the universe, seed the solar system. But it takes a long time. These ships, they don't travel, they travel at sublight speed, so it takes a long time for them to get where they're going. So we have this one ship that leads in the year 2751. It's a seed ship that heads to this planet called Thalassa, okay? And they established a successful colony there. The first landing is in the year 3109. They build this big dish thing so they can communicate with Earth. And I think that's depicted on the cover. Big dish, similar to what we use for SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And they beam signals back to Earth. So Earth is in contact with this colony and knows, hey, we have a successful colony on this planet. This isn't the only one. There's several ships that go out. Not all of them are entirely successful. Some of them I never hear from again. They don't know what happened to them. For instance, Clarke mentions like private ships built by Mormons, and nobody knows what happened to those ships. So that's one of the interesting ideas that he brings up that is never further explored. At a certain point in Thalassa's history, they have the eruption of Mount Kraken, okay? Talk a little bit about Thalassa real quick. Thalassa is a planet that's almost entirely water. It's like water world. But there's this chain where there's 3 islands. And there's like a North Island and a South Island. I think the third island has the volcano on it, or the caldera. I don't know. They only talk about the 2 islands, really, the North and the South Island. So I'm not sure about that third island. It's not really talked about a whole lot. But just imagine if it was Hawaii, and Hawaii was the only landmass on the planet and everything else was water. That's what this planet is like. So they have like a population cap, like where they can't exceed their birth rate. So it's all set up to be very to keep the resources and stuff of this chain of islands optimal. All right. But this Mount Kraken erupts in the year three, I guess it's in the 300s or three, I don't know. You can see the timeline somewhere in between. They lose contact. They lose the dish on Thalassa is damaged and they lose contact with Earth. All right, so what it happens is, as you can see in the timeline, there's these last days of Earth. All right, and then this ship is launched. The ship called the Magellan. Okay, now the Magellan has more advanced technology because it uses a quantum drive. So it travels faster than the earlier seed ships, and it's launched just before the Earth explodes or before the sun goes nova and blows up the solar system. Now these people on this quantum ship, it's a sleeper ship. So most of the people are in cryostasis. They're frozen and they're woken up. The ship witnesses the end of the solar system. Talks about the pyramids like melting on Earth and Mars, like being destroyed and everything. But the Magellan, it travels fast, so it gets to Thalassa. Now, why does it go to Thalassa? They think that the colony there is wiped out. It's a ship that it's a colony that is on their way to a planet called Sagan 2. So the Magellan is headed for Sagan 2 in order to establish a colony there. But their shield is damaged. So they have the ship, the Magellan that they're traveling on, the shield that protects the ship from space debris, cosmic dust, micrometeors, that type of thing, is in need of repair. So they stop at Thalassa on their way to try to freeze ice to make a big ice shield for the front of the ship that they can then use to continue their journey to Sagan 2 and establish a colony there. So unlike earlier ships, these aren't like embryo. It's not like a robot ship. They still have robots, but like I said, they're in cryo sleep. So there's these differences between the two societies. And the Magellan stops at Thalassa. That's how the book opens up and establishes contact for the purposes of building a ship. And we have kind of like this, I don't know, it's kind of Star Trek-y in a way. It's, an alien society, but the aliens are us, essentially. They haven't discovered aliens yet. And there's, on this planet, it's kind of like free love. Thalassa is like a free love society where everybody just sleeps with everybody. And they said that they've moved beyond jealousy, but at the same time, they've kind of moved beyond passion. I don't know. This whole society just seems very lethargic to me. It has no ambition. They're kind of all just living in this utopia. And therein kind of lies the major problem I have with the book, is there's no conflict between the ship, the Magellan's crew, and the people on Thalassa. Okay, and there's a romance involved. One of the crew members from the Magellan, named Lawrenson, I believe he's a lieutenant commander on board the vessel. He falls in love with Marissa, who lives on one of the islands there, and yeah, it's not done very well. Arthur C. Clarke's characters are all just kind of flat, cardboard characters, but he's got some really interesting ideas. And I mean, a lot of interesting ideas in the book. And there's just a lot of stuff that's left on the floor. There's weird sciencey stuff. There's really cool concepts that he introduced, and then he does nothing with them. And so this book, if you're into science fiction, maybe you're a person that wants to write science fiction, that's why you would read this book, is for the ideas, because you can grab any one of the multiple ideas presented in the novel and make an entire science fiction novel based off of just that one thing. Okay? So for instance, there's a character named Moses Caldor in this book, who is also from the Magellan. And he talks about like the crew of the Thalassa, or not the Thalassa, but the crew of the Magellan come from Earth after it has abandoned religion. And he talks about the purge of literature. Um, and I was like, wow, why would you want to come from a planet that did that? Like, imagine that. He talks about a great purge, chapter 24, called Archive. I'm just going to talk about this. He says the 1,000 years ago, okay, men of genius and goodwill had rewritten history and gone through the libraries of Earth, deciding what should be saved and what should be abandoned to the flames. The criterion of choice was simple, though often hard to apply. Only if it would contribute to survival and social stability on the New World would any work of literature, any record of the past, be loaded into the memory of the seed ships. The task was, of course, impossible as well as heartbreaking. With tears in their eyes, the selection panels had thrown away the Veda, the Bible, the Tripitaka, the Quran, and all the immense body of literature, fiction, and nonfiction that was based upon them. Let's think about this. I'll skip down some more. He says also in the Great Purge, he says, lost also in the Purge were virtually all the works of the supreme novelists, poets, and playwrights, which in any case would have been meaningless without their philosophical and cultural background. Homer, Shakespeare, Milton, Tolstoy, Melville, Proust. All this in the junk heap of history. Let's think about that for a minute. A society that threw away all the literature in the hopes that it would keep people from reading about war and having ideas about God, which in Arthur C. Clarke's mind causes all the conflicts. He has a whole chapter about God. And myself, I'm an Orthodox Christian, so I don't agree with Arthur C. Clarke at all. But I do like to read books like this that have alternate viewpoints so that I can engage with other worldviews. And I believe it's on page 253. I have it written down here. Whatever gods may be. Moses Caldor from the Magellan has a conversation with Marissa from planet Thalassa about God, because they don't even use God's name in vain as an expletive. They use Kraken, the name of the volcano that erupted and destroyed the dish. So if they get, they smash their thumb with a hammer, they say Kraken, which is weird. But he talks about the kind of like the problem of evil here, which is something that a lot of atheists have attacked, and he talks about the Inquisitions and religious jihads and whatnot, and how humanity on Earth finally did away with religion. And I guess in Arthur C. Clarke's mind, if we could just get rid of religion, then we'd be in a utopia. So he's really a believer in utopianism, which, it doesn't like turn me off to the book completely, but I clearly don't agree with this guy. But I found those ideals interesting just to kind of get in, but he doesn't go very far with them. So there's not really enough there. There's really not enough meat on the bone for me to like sink my teeth into and to think about with any depth or meaning. So like I said, there's a lot of really interesting ideas in the book that are not developed or explored like at all. For one point, there's a group in the book, and it's just one page, where the Thalassan society has a group that they call the conservers, who happen to be like environmental extremists, like Greenpeace on steroids. And he never talks about them again. Like you would think that they would be a volatile force within this utopian society that maybe would cause some disruption and break up the monotony of the utopianism, but they never come into play. There is a mutiny on board the Thalassa, and you think, oh, this is interesting. Like, we got a group of crew members here that don't want to go to Sagan 2, who are threatening to take over the ship. or sabotage it so that they can stay on the Lhasa instead of going to Sagan 2. And that really goes nowhere. It's resolved without incident. It's just this whole thing where it's like there's literally no conflict in the novel, and it's really, it makes for a boring read. Okay, that's the thing. If you have no conflict, then there's no tension. Um, you're just reading about a utopian society, and I think that's really kind of where the book, its downfall is for me. Is it needs something, you know, there to keep you engaged. And I guess I finished it because the chapters are relatively short. Like a lot of them are just 2 pages. It's just kind of disappointing. I guess I was expecting more from this novel. Now, it wasn't, I didn't hate the book. Again, it was an okay read. I don't think there's anything that's like really horrible about it. I mean, I don't like the free love society that they live in, but honestly, his writing about sex is so antiseptic and sterile that it's like it's not even offensive. Like there's nothing offensive about it. Like I said, everybody in this book just seems to state everything as if it's a scientific fact and without passion. Like I really need, if to give the Star Trek approach here, this book feels like it was written by Mr. Spock. And I really need some Leonard McCoy. I need some emotion. I need some fire and passion. If you're gonna like put forth these concepts and ideas, then put some passion behind it, man. Because otherwise you're just like, it's like very robotic. But I'm gonna give you one spoiler here at the very end, which I was sad. It's another concept he brings up that I was like, it goes nowhere. So if you don't want to know like about that, I'll just give you my recommendation. If you are into science fiction and you are a person that likes big ideas, this is a recommend. If you don't like sci-fi, don't start here. Okay? Don't start with this book as your first science fiction book. I'm afraid it will turn you off to the science fiction genre. You'll be bored. But if you're a person that's read a lot of science fiction, I think there's a lot of really cool ideas. So there's my final recommendation for you. Now, the spoiler at the end. If you don't want to hear it, you can end now. But I thought this was interesting. There are these lobster creatures, these lobster scorpion type things that live in the oceans of the Lhasa that seem to be sentient. So they are sentient aliens that they inadvertently, that the Lhassans established a colony on a planet that already had life, which is a kind of a violation of their prime directive. They don't want to come into contact with intelligent beings. But even there's like no conflict because the scorps, as they call them, live in the ocean and the Lhassan citizens live on the land. So they really have minimal interaction with each other. And you'd think, well, maybe this would build to some sort of interesting conflict. And it doesn't. The scorps are pretty much brought up. And it seems like they think that the Lhassans are their gods. Maybe it's implied that they think that the Lhassans have brought metal, and they might be establishing some sort of religion where they are revering the Thalassans. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And he just drops it. And you're just like, what are you doing, man? Like you finally give me something interesting and you just like, you do nothing with it, dude. So lots of cool ideas, lots of interesting concepts that just go absolutely nowhere. All right, that's it. This was a long review, but I felt this book was worthy of being discussed. But I'm kind of like now, I don't really feel like driven to read. I'm having trouble deciding what to read next. All right. I guess that's it. I enjoyed this book a lot more than the last book I read, The Road, but it's got its same character problem where the characters are just flat cardboard cutouts. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day.